smear his hands with blood. You may not have, you may not have, you may not have my daughter dear, and smear her heart with hate. The plans for war, the thirst for blood, the cruel revenge is staged to prolong the fear, the thought of peace, the love of life, the vision of our children living side by side. You may not have, you may not have, you may not have my son, and smear his hands with blood. You may not have, you may not have, you may not have my daughter dear, and smear her heart with hate. Time passes by, days filled with tears, years languish on for all who lose their dearest loved ones. My treasured child, not born to die, but born to live and lead us to the hope that is tomorrow. You may not have, you may not have, you may not have my son, and smear his hands with blood. You may not have, you may not have, you may not have my daughter dear, and smear her heart with hate. My sons and daughters, all growing children, they will not kill for you, makers of the bombs. My children breathe, their strong hearts beat, and they will teach us how we can live in peace. You may not have, you may not have, you may not have my son, and smear his hands with blood. You may not have, you may not have, you may not have my daughter dear, and smear her heart with hate.
Hello, hello, hello. Good evening. We want to welcome everyone to It's Kairos Time. Want to first give space for that beautiful song and video that we just heard from. And thank you for everybody joining us tonight. A Kairos moment is a time when crisis and opportunity collide and the possibility for something new can emerge. We're so excited and blessed to be in conversation with Reverend Holly Hatley Thompson, a blood member of the Shinnecock Nation, and Karina Gore, director of the Center for Earth Ethics at Union Theological Seminary. Tonight, we're going to hear about how your respective work is responding to the moment that we're in, and especially the impacts of militarism and its connection to the ecological devastation that we're seeing across the country, and also the sacredness of this earth. And so before we jump into our questions that we have for y'all today, I figured it would be great to just get y'all to introduce yourselves. And so my first question, I guess, is just who are your people? Who are you? Let's start with Karina.
Well, thank you so much, Jarvis, and thank you. It's wonderful to be with Reverend Holly here and with you, and I'm just delighted. Love the Kairos Center. Means a lot to me to be included in this powerful dialogue. And who am I and who are my people? Well, let's see. I ancestrally come from Europeans who came to this land and mainly settled in the mid-south region of Tennessee and Kentucky and Virginia. I feel, though, now so much solidarity, accountability, and kinship with peoples here who, I would say, because of the work that we focus on at the Center for Earth Ethics, those people that are living really close to the earth, those people that are most affected by the ecological issues, whether it's those impacts from the climate change, like heat waves and storms and so on, or on that front end with pollution, including the water pollution and the air pollution. And so I've come to feel part of a movement of people that's really starting to focus on that human nature relationship. And it's just wonderful to be with you all, because I know that we're in that together.
No, absolutely. And we here at Kairos are definitely in community with you in that fight. So thank you for naming that, and thank you for being here, Corinna.
Thanks.
Reverend Holly, how you doing?
I'm doing all right. Thank you so much for an invitation to be a part of this conversation. I can only do 17 things at once, and this meeting is actually number 17. You'll see me speeding eastward toward the land of the Shinnecock. And my name is Holly Hale Thompson. I'm an enrolled member of the Shinnecock Nation, and we have always been in what is now known as Eastern Long Island, New York. Our traditional land was very much from Brookhaven to East Hampton, and those are modern settler names for the territory of the Shinnecock people. My elder cousin told me as I travel today, do so in the palm of the Great One. The Shinnecocks will be in our traditional territory, waiting for me when I get there. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, we sure do. We wish you the best and safest travels as you speed towards your people. And thank you for being here with us tonight, Reverend Holly. And so I guess, Reverend Holly, just to keep talking to you, we've talked a little bit before about the impact of militarism on Native communities. And today, we're kind of reframing this conversation around the sacred earth and militarism. And so I guess just to open up this conversation, can you tell us about what your relationship to the land is? You named the Shinnecock people. Why must we consider land sacred?
Oh, land as sacred. I will preface my response to that, Jarvis, by I don't want to forget to make this recommendation. Winona LaDuke has a 2013 book entitled The Militarization of Indian Country. And it's a good resource, and I recommend that to everyone. And then I will go ahead and talk about our relationship to the land. Our people have graciously, and when I say gracious, I'm not talking about the behaviors of the people with whom we have been wrestling for 382 years. When the settlers came and very soon began claiming different kinds of ownership that Aboriginal people did not have. We don't have a way to own the air or a way to own the water, and neither did we have a way to own the land. But one of the things that the settlers claimed was the ways to believe and to worship and to eat and to dress. And all of that was news. It wasn't good news, it was bad news to us these almost 400 years ago. And what they have disregarded in acting as if they're supreme beings, and behavior said that. If words didn't say it, said it too, but if words didn't say it, behavior speaks that very loudly. And we can follow that pathway as deep wagon ruts for these past 400 years. But with that attitude, there is not a time to listen and to learn. And I'm waiting for that day to happen. I'm not holding my breath until that day happens, but I find that it's a very long time coming for our neighbors to realize that we are held by our land. Our land protects us. We are caretakers of our land. But I dare say, were it not for the Shinnecock having the territory that we have held very tightly to, we would have been dispersed. And like so many of our relatives, genocided even more than we were. But this is where the Great Spirit put us. And we look out to see our waters, and the waters feed us, and our land that can grow our crops. And we are related. Our blood is in the land, our DNA is in the land. We and the land are one. Now I'm going to ask you to
Absolutely.
repeat the part about militarism in that, but I just want to say
Well, look, I really appreciate you saying that, and it really is now is the time to listen and learn, and we have no other choice at this point, right? And we know that like if we don't, then there will be time made. And so, Corinna, maybe we'll turn to you and ask, do you have anything to add? What is, why should we consider land sacred? Do you have any insights there?
Well, let me say first, much respect to the Shinnecock Nation, and what a wonderful thing and an honor to be in conversation. And we're one day after Indigenous Peoples Day, which now the fact that is being widely marked shows that there is some listening. Of course, not perfect in any way, so much more to go. But I should say I'm here on the land that was homeland and ancestral land of the Lenape people. And one of the wonderful gifts of this consciousness and awareness is to actually imagine that that way of life when there was a respect for water as a living entity, and for other natural beings as more as relatives than just as resources, when there was a sense that there was a shared communal way in which people were joining together for the bounty of the land, for food, for the water to drink, that this was from creator and creation, and that we were meant to share it with each other in that way. And as we think now, now we know, this I'm here in what they called Mannahatta, and we would call Manhattan, and the Hudson River, which they called the Mahicantuck. We can't get fish out of there. We can't drink water out of there because it was poisoned with PCBs, a while back by General Electric. And there's ways in which the society, as Reverend Holly was saying, that, I certainly come out of, has treated nature and water and land and air just like it is a sewer and a waste dump, just like, you can just take and take and take and not give back. So we have to really think, where did that mentality come from? And how do we solve it? And the first step, I think, is to listen to those Native Indigenous peoples and those people that have been living with that other system in there, that other mindset, and learn. And I think, just to add about what makes land sacred, our bodies are in so many ways. Obviously we breathe air, we drink water, the food we eat is nourished in the soil. We have iron in our blood. This idea that we're separate is an illusion. And also, we have this chance to see our common humanity with other people. There's so many things that divide us, or seem to, and to be able to see each other and see that we breathe that same air is actually essential wisdom. And we need to also talk about the justice components of where it comes out, because a lot of times it's the dehumanization of peoples that leads to the poisoning of their water and the land, and it must stop now. So thanks for that question, and great to be talking about it.
Of course. Yeah, of course. Reverend Holly, were you going to jump in?
I don't know if you guys missed me, but I couldn't hear you for about a minute or two, so I'm back. I'm afraid that's going to happen. So,
Okay.
John, I think it's a certain feeling that so many communities never get the opportunity, except that as Shinnecock people, we walk not only where our fuzzy, vague ancestors walked. I know where my great-grandmother Cora stood and held her mother's hand and cried when the Circassian went down in 1876. I know where our people would climb to the top of Sugarloaf and stand and look out across the Shinnecock Bay into the ocean. And from that highest point, we could see a pod of whale swimming by. And the Podawee began because the whale fed our people. And I can stand exactly where that happened for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years. And so it's hard to explain that. And it's an emotional thing for me in the past 2 years because I'd grown up with that vision of standing high atop Sugarloaf, looking out to the bay and looking to the ocean before the Podawee begins. I'd heard that all my life, and it wasn't until I was 62 years old that I was able to stand in that place and I recognized exactly what I had been told. And it was a gift that I know I had possessed, and then I got to breathe it, and my feet knew it, and my arms knew it, and my eyes knew it. So we talk about life and life being sacred, and we must never accept that life being sacred is any small or finite size. Life of the very grass that I stood upon that helped me connect 10,000 years of history. So we need to broaden our definition of what is life and what is sacred about life, and how that insect performs their role in this creation as much and probably a lot better than a lot of humans perform their role in creation. It is sacred that permeates, and it is life that is boundless.
Boundless. No, it absolutely is. And we do need to broaden our definition of what it means to be in relationship to the land and also just to be here. And there's this theme that you both kind of speak to of like this construction of illusions through this political and like often like militaristic conquest, right? Like, and also like ecological devastation and pollution. And so I want to direct this next question to Corinna. And you work at the Center for Earth Ethics, and you describe this place as, you know, somewhere where you can explore, you know, these moral and spiritual dimensions of the climate crisis. And so just like I want to talk to you about, like, can you respond to some of the recent policy and legislative decisions that leave out this very bottom of society that we've been talking about, you know, that also make compromises on protecting our climate and our land, and that privatize our land? And just like what we're seeing in Jackson, Mississippi, I'm from Mississippi, and just like how this privatization is just affecting the land of those that have been there for years, right? And so we know this enables the funding of war and militarism, and not, the justification of this sacred earth. And so, just want to, do you have any responses to some of these policies?
Yes, absolutely. Well, it's good to know you're from Mississippi, and I know that we've been watching the water crisis in Jackson, and just really hearts go out to the people that are suffering there from that. Also, watching the work that the Kairos Center and the Poor People's Campaign have been doing, galvanizing action, providing a platform for people to speak their experiences and truth. It's been really powerful to see that. So, thanks for that work. And I feel, obviously, we know that. There's a lot of money put into the military budget, and sometimes very little questions asked about it in terms of need, where at the same time we have chronic disinvestment in terms of infrastructure. And that is part of what we see in going on in Jackson, Mississippi, and it's absolutely unacceptable. We should be prioritizing investment in the basic human needs. Water should be a human right. Clean air, right to a healthy environment was just recognized by the United Nations, and we need to see, here in this country that. That is the most fundamental thing. If you look at our foundational principles, and also how we've grown since then in recognizing what we want this country to be. So I feel, we've had the Inflation Reduction Act, which is a bill that has a piece of legislation that passed and was signed that has a lot of incentives in it to reduce emissions, and that's actually going to be quite positive in terms of trying to get a handle on the stronger storms and the heat waves that are coming our way. We also know, though, that there are compromises made that have been unacceptable in terms of allowing for more oil and gas leasing, particularly along the Gulf Coast and in Alaska. There's the issue of the Mountain Valley Pipeline going through Virginia, West Virginia, and the people there that have been standing up for their land, that care about that land. Really the other species on the land, the water, as well as just the integrity of the process, because the process of our self-government is also really deteriorating at the same rate as we're allowing these often profit-driven interests to just privatize and gobble up a lot of this that should be common inheritance, commonly held and shared land, water, air. And so I think that it's absolutely critical to have, I was thinking about the fact that, the Kairos Center has often drawn attention to Martin Luther King's speech Beyond Vietnam, Breaking the Silence in 1967, where he talked about those connections with militarism, poverty, and racism. And in it, he has this line about, he's describing what's going on in Vietnam with the militarism, and he has this line about how they must see our destruction of their environment, how they must be experiencing it over in Vietnam. And he talks about bulldozers coming to destroy precious trees and taking their crops and land. And the violence of that was something that King saw, in particular, that ecological violence. And I'm glad that you're drawing these connections with militarism, not only because there is the issue of the money in the budgets, right? And what gets paid for and what doesn't. There's the issue of the moral decay when we've allowed ourselves as a nation to be beholden to oil and gas moguls in the world that have power, that like in Saudi Arabia, for example, where we'll look the other way on something because of the power they hold because of oil. That's a type of moral decay as well. And then also, finally, I just wanted to say that violence that happens ecologically in war, also you can see the violence in terms of what Coretta Scott King and others have called slow violence, when you're slowly poisoning air and water and you're hurting people, and that we would do that to our own people in this country is really unacceptable. So it's time for that, what was called for, that radical revolution of values, which means air, water, land, keeping it clean and keeping it public.
Yep, absolutely. And I'm glad that you brought up, like moral decay, because I mean, it absolutely is, right? Like we we know that this doesn't have to be this way. Like this, we can create policies that are just, and we can create things that are reflective of who we are as a people. And so thank you for naming that. I'm not sure if Reverend Holly, if you can still hear us. She may be having a few issues. But I'm glad that you named that, Corinna, and I want to return to some of your thoughts about like this country's warped moral narrative. Let's like continue on that vein, because we know that religious nationalism has been used to justify this systemic violence against poor people, right, and people of color specifically, and it's currently threatening our democracy and our fundamental rights. And so, just want to ask, why is it imperative that this work be taken on? What do you see at stake? And yeah, we'll start there.
Great. Well, and let me say that Reverend Holly put in the chat that she can hear us, even though she's having some other connectivity trouble. So I just want to say that, it was really a beautiful memory and truth that you shared, Reverend Holly, and really thankful for that. And for Shinnecock Nation and all of the caretaking that you have done, and just very respectfully feeling that right now. But I also want to respond and say that, one of the things that sometimes we have these aha moments, in our work or our life. And one of them for me was actually when I was at Union Seminary, where Kairos Center is also based, and I learned about the doctrine of discovery, whereby in the 15th century, when European colonizers were launching ships to come to what we now know as the Americas and Africas, that there was a mandate that was actually theological, that was really invoking the book of Genesis and the Bible, and that it came from the Vatican at the time, and Pope Alexander VI and some other popes were involved, but basically saying that, this is you should conquer, vanquish, and subdue the peoples, the flora and fauna, and the peoples of these lands in the name of Christ, and that the people who were there were part of the flora and fauna. And the reason why this, obviously this is a total distortion of the book of Genesis and says nothing about the essence of that teaching or about Christianity. But the reason why it seems so relevant was that in thinking about the climate crisis and how it's connected to racism, to the genocide of Native peoples, you can see that there's that root way of thinking of just domination. And in the end, it's so violent that it turns back on itself. And in the end, it's going to actually take us all down if we don't heal at that root. And that's why I think this conversation about how, about what's sacred, about ending that deranged way of thinking that's always othering, that's always oppressing, that's always dominating, and understanding that all that violence is only violence against ourselves in the end. And it's time for a better way.
It absolutely is time for a better way and a better path out of what we've, like you said, where we've gotten ourselves. So Corinna, thank you so much for speaking. I'm not sure if Reverend Holly is going to be able to say some closing words, but just want to echo what Reverend Holly said a while ago. And she said, we're held by our land, and our land protects us. And as we close, I really hope that we all take that to heart and move in a way that protects our land and also protects each other. And Corinna, do you have any closing thoughts?
No, well, I just want to say that, that when I say that about the doctrine of discovery, a lot of times I just want to mention at the end that I feel sometimes when I say that, like I'm beating up on Christianity or I'm beating up on religion or something, but it's not that. In fact, I think it shows how powerful it is that we're living in a world of belief systems, of where perception matters, values matter a lot. And when we talk about politics, sometimes we don't get to that level. A lot of people are just talking about the data, the statistics, the polls, the power plays, and so on. And I really just want to compliment Kairos Center for doing the work that you do on that deeper level. And that includes work like I know Reverend Liz Theo Harris has done Battle for the Bible. So that's like going back into those texts and scriptures and really reading and interpreting them rather than allowing them to continue to be distorted the way that they have. So I just wanted to say that. Thanks for the opportunity, and thank you for having me on.
Thank you for speaking. And thank everybody for tuning in, and y'all be safe.
Cool.
Have a good one.
Thanks, Reverend Holly, if you can hear us.
Yeah, thanks, Reverend Holly. Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks, Jarvis. Bye.